Your voice is needed for somebody. I have this conversation with my wife all the time because we, go to therapy. I think everyone should have their therapist on speed dial. But she goes and comes back from her therapy session and says, doctor said such and such and such and such. And I said, I think I said such and such and such and such first. Can I have my $100 back? And it's not what was said, it was who was saying it. And that's the same when God calls us. He doesn't call you because he thinks somebody else can say it. Somebody else probably can. But who you need to reach has to be reached from your own voice. And that's the difference.
How would you like a shout out of your name and your story for free on social, possibly my TV show and a commercial? Stay tuned for more. Hi, if you need to meet, my name is Raquel and I'm your GPS for success. And I am so excited to introduce to you one of the authors for the anthology, Saying Yes to the Whisper, How One Yes to God Changed Everything. Hi, Daryl. Why you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
My name is Daryl Snow. I'm the owner of Praxis 33, which is a transformational coaching and consulting business, as well as the host of A Warrior Spirit, which is my podcast that is helping people turn their mess into their message and make it a survival guide for others.
And it's also now found on the Prospera TV network, on YouTube and Roku, and soon it'll be everywhere else, like on Amazon Fire and on Apple TV plus iOS. So all kinds of cool and juicy things that you are doing. And I would love for you to answer the question, why do you think it's so important for people to say yes to that whisper? What has it done for you?
Well, first off, if you don't say yes to the whisper, it becomes louder. Just because we say no to God's plan doesn't mean God says no to us. So it is better to trust his vision for our life than the vision we have or the picture we have in our own head. So there have been several times throughout my life where, I've said no, and it's turned out that God was relentless, and then I said yes, and life improved. So I have to discern between my ego and his voice and then move accordingly. So.
That's such a great answer. One of the things that hit me yesterday when I was thinking about this, and then I saw it on a reel, was this thing where people are like, well, if I don't do it, God would just choose somebody else. And I used to have that belief system, like, oh, well, he's not going to hold up somebody else's prayer because, I'm not moving on it. And then I saw this reel. It's exactly what you're saying. Like, no, it's not true. And she said, there are things that we are meant to do specifically. And when we don't do them, it actually impacts negatively generations. So it just felt so heavy, like, oh, wait. We always presume, right? We always make these presumptions is like, we're all designed for something. God actually made us to be containers of answers from heaven. And when we don't do it, we just think that he'll just pass that along, but not always. So what would you like to say about that?
Well, I always use Moses as an example whenever people talk about what you just said, because Moses was a murderer. Moses didn't feel worthy. Moses was telling God, hey, you got the wrong guy. As a matter of fact, go pick my brother Aaron. He's a better suited individual for it. And God didn't give up on that. God had a plan specifically for Moses, and now Moses is one of the best known names in the Bible outside of God and Jesus, right? So your voice is needed for somebody. I have this conversation with my wife all the time because we go to therapy. I think everyone should have their therapist on speed dial. But she goes and comes back from her therapy session and says, doctor said such and such and such and such. And I said, I think I said such and such and such and such first. Can I have my $100 back? And it's not what was said, it was who was saying it. And that's the same when God calls us. He doesn't call you because he thinks somebody else can say it. Somebody else probably can, but who you need to reach has to be reached from your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference. And I work with clients all the time, and they talk about how, there's other people doing this or there's other people doing that, and no one will believe me. And I always tell them, go to any bread aisle in America. There's 30 different varieties of bread. They're all wrapped in plastic and they're all sliced, but somebody's buying each different variety because somebody needs it from somebody else. And it's the same with our whisper. God's putting that in your heart or in your head, not because it can come out of somebody else's mouth, but because it needs to come out of yours. And then the great thing about God is that he doesn't all, just tell us to do it or, put it in our brain. He resources us to do it as well. We think, oh, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have blah, blah, blah. Those are excuses and lies that we tell ourselves to say no, when in fact, if he puts it in your heart, he puts a way for it to manifest. So do you have to work at it a little bit? Do you have to look for it? I mean, it's not a leprechaun with a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. Yes, you have to do some part of it, but if you seek it, you will find it. So.
That's so good. I think what came to mind as you were speaking was, and I know in my own life, was that first of all, in the book of Esther, right, when she's confronted, it's like, you need to go say something to the king or else we're all going to die. She's like, well, I can't go because if I go, if I'm not summoned, it can kill me. I can die. And he said, what makes you think like if you don't, God won't raise another? And I think, it's one of those things where all of it is true. Yes, there are moments where if you don't do it, God will raise another. And what you also said was true. There's like certain things that we are meant to do. And when we are presuming that it's just going to be passed along because we read that portion in Esther, I know for the first 2 books where I got a download, I did not write them, the first one, and I saw it written by somebody else, same title, same subject, so same. It was exactly the same. But it was not in my voice. And I'm not always the sharpest tool in the shed. That was like 18 months later. I looked at the library. I was like, wait, there's my book. And it was under like new books. And then it happened again the second time. I was just like 18 months later, there's the book I was supposed to write written by someone else. And it was the same thing. It was like, it was not your voice. It wasn't going to do what it was supposed to do. But that information still needed to come out. So I think what you were saying is like discerning is so important because we don't know what's going to be passed to somebody else is going to get the baton. It's not always the case. And we take this one part in scripture instead of seeing like the totality, like you said, that was supposed to come through Moses, like things were going to come through David, like Jesus had to come through David's line specifically. There are specific things that we're supposed to do. And it's presumptuous to think that God's going to give the baton to someone else, not necessarily. So before we wrap this up and I let people know how they can possibly get their story in social media and saying yes to the whisper, what would you like to say to the audience around that?
I think if you have a story, which we all do, I think if you look back at the parts of your life where you said no, see how that worked out to the times where you said yes. And then share both of those sides because both are equally important to your story. So if you said no and it hasn't worked out, and then you've said yes and it has, somebody needs to hear that so that they have the courage to stand out too. One of my favorite lines is from We Bought a Zoo when he tells his daughter, if you just have 2 minutes of courage, 2 minutes of unrelentless courage, I promise you something good of it will come. And if you just have 2 minutes of courage to say yes to that whisper, something good will come.
Oh, that is so good, Daryl. It's so good. I'm going to put everything you need to know to connect with Daryl down in the description below or up above, depending on where we're at. Facebook will be above. Everything else is kind of below or on the side. So if you want to connect with Daryl, everything you need to know will be there. And if you have a story, I want to hear it. Why don't you go ahead and put your story of, I love this. Yes, Daryl. Tell us when you said no and what happened. And tell us when you said yes and what happened. That'll really help to motivate and inspire other people. And testimonies are so important because your story does matter. somebody might look at your story and say, oh my gosh, I went through the same thing, or I'm in that space right now. And if it worked out for you, it breathes hope into other people. And we need hope in order for things to get anchored. So I would love to know your story. Go ahead and drop it wherever you're seeing it. And then if you end up getting chosen as one of the ones we're going to go ahead and give some free promo on, I will go ahead and reach out to you. But it will come from my official channels. So nothing. And I'm not going to charge you for it. So if anybody's saying you have to pay for anything, no, you don't. No, you don't. Have any questions, go ahead and send me directly a message in any of my socials, and I will get back to you. Until next time, may God's riches and best be yours. Bye for now.